Hello and welcome again to SoulSchool and to my series about angelic realms. In this episode, I want to talk to you about your relationship with your angel, your guardian angel, your Daimon, your genius, the part of you that knows a great deal about what is going on. I want to first of all describe an occasion which happened to my husband. This was many years ago, about 40 years ago actually. And he was driving home one night. He had borrowed a car from somebody, and his excuse was that he didn't know how to handle the suspension because it was different from his own car. Anyway, the long and the short of it is that he lost control of the car and it began to roll down the road, rolling over and over down the road and rolling from the correct side of that he should be driving into the oncoming traffic. Now, it was quite a quiet night. It was at night time. And as he realised he'd lost control, he suddenly found himself out of his body. And the way he described it was that he was a couple of 100 feet. That's how he put it. I remember that distinctly. A couple of 100 feet above the scene, from whence he could see his car rolling down the road, and he could see some lights coming towards him in the other direction, and his car was going to definitely collide with the oncoming car. Now, in his out-of-the-body state where he could see this happening, he heard a voice speak to him. And the voice said, "Don't worry, nobody's going to get hurt." The next thing is he found himself back in the car. The car was upside down. It had definitely had a prang with the oncoming car. There were people from neighbouring houses who'd come out to see what had happened, and they were hovering around the driver's area of his car, and they were asking themselves, where's the driver? But he had found himself not in the driving seat, and by the way, no safety belts at that time in history. This was in the 80s, early 80s. He found himself, as he described it, curled up in a ball on the back seat, or upside down from the back, and the back window was broken and he managed to climb out. And as he climbed out, he could hear people say, "What's happened to the driver?" And he came out of the back and said to them, "I'm the driver." Had he been in that front seat, he would definitely have been killed. He had crashed into a car, a smaller car, with 3 fairly elderly passengers in it, and none of them was seriously hurt. They had a few scratches and bruises, but it was true what the voice said to him: nobody was going to get hurt. Now, there are a couple of things about that I'd go into. One of them is that my husband was 6'4". And it's a complete mystery how he got from the driver's seat when it was rolling down the road and got into the back seat, especially as the driver's seat had a headrest. So there's not much space between the headrest and the roof of the car. But somehow his 6'4" body had got from the front seat into the back seat. It might have been the momentum of the rolling. That's a possibility. But he was not aware of having to move himself. He did not consciously get himself from the front seat into the back seat in order to be safer. So that's one thing. Then the other thing is, where does the voice come from? Where did the voice come from? He said he could hear it, and when he said hear it, he meant like it was somebody speaking to him out here. When I asked him, well, what did the voice sound like? He said, well, I sort of thought it sounded a bit like my voice. Now, at the time, we didn't have conversations about guardian angels. And yet we were aware that something had happened that meant that he had had some kind of intervention into what could have been a fatal occasion for him. And we talked a great deal about it over the years, and we both agreed in this concept that there's a deep knowing within us that's beyond our logic and our reason, which can tell us things that we don't know yet, or can tell us about things that are going to happen or are not going to happen, because part of us knows the story and how it's going to work out, or how it could work out. So I wouldn't say that an angel is necessarily going to guard you against disaster. And certainly my husband died, what I think is relatively young, a couple of years back, in his mid-60s. So you could say, well, where was this voice then? What did the voice say to him at the point that he left his body on that occasion and did not return to it? We don't know. Nonetheless, as far as I'm concerned, it's a good example of an occasion where the knowing part of us speaks to us. And it speaks to us from a deeper part of ourselves that can compute a lot of information and stuff that we cannot grasp with our rational processes. And to me, that's very encouraging, because it does suggest that even though my husband died, and I'm very, very sad and miss him terribly, even so, I do have a feeling that there's a story for him. Part of the story was not dying in a car crash when he was even younger. Part of his story is dying on the occasion that he did in 2021. So I trust that this process that he is going through, being incarnated into one story which included me, and then going on for another story which doesn't include me, as far as I know, as far as I'm aware of. Perhaps part of me does know, and I haven't consciously become aware of it. But the trust that I feel is because I see that a particular occasion and other things that have happened for me and for my husband as supporting experiences in understanding how things can transpire for us. Now, it's not the same as being guarded from tomfoolery or your own stupidity, because you have got a mind that can sort certain things out in this everyday life. And that leads me to something else I wanted to mention in this particular episode. And I wondered if you've ever watched the series called The Crown, a television series. And there's an episode where Queen Elizabeth recalls some of her tutoring that she had when she was a young girl, and she had to go to Eton College to have lessons about the British constitution. Now, once she's become the Queen and she has to have these meetings with prime ministers, there's an occasion where she remembers something from her school days and she goes to fetch the notebook so she can make sure she's got it right. And what she recounts to the Prime Minister, because she's sort of having to tell him off, what she recounts is that the British Constitution has two strands, the dignified and the efficient. Now, as you can imagine, the dignified is the monarch and the efficient is the government organisation, in particular the Prime Minister. And the role of the Prime Minister is to get the everyday business done. And the role of the monarch, the dignified, is to keep an eye on that process in relationship to what the British Constitution expects. So there's a balanced relationship described there, or what should be a balanced relationship, between the efficiency and effectiveness of the processes of government under the auspices of a Prime Minister and his cabinet, but also the kind of overview of the monarch, who has got a kind of remit to kind of say, but hold on, couldn't it be like this, or shouldn't it be like this? You know, there's a lot of talk about, well, how much really does a British monarch have any control? But these conversations are supposed to happen every week. And so the interchange between the Prime Minister and the monarch are very significant in the way things work out for the British population. Now, I bring this up because I think that the efficient and the dignified are rather like our everyday self. The efficient, having to get up, having to go to work or go to school or whatever you're doing, or earning money to pay the rent. That's the efficient part of yourself, your everyday self, interacting with the world, with other people. And the dignified part of yourself is this angelic energy, and it can reveal itself as an entity, discarnate entity. It can reveal itself through a spoken word, by speaking to you. It can reveal itself by an inner feeling of a kind of knowing when something's right or something's wrong. But it can also reveal itself on occasion to people as an outer visual appearance. And in our modern way of thinking about things, it's quite difficult, really, for people to listen to that, to accept it, to consider that they should be working with something inner. And it's not just for the benefit of the efficient part of your life that you could be listening to a divinity, the God within you, but also that the God within you, the angel within you, Daimon, whatever word you like, needs you as well, because that divinity wishes to function in the world. It wishes to make things happen in the world. And you, in your everyday self, you are the one who can allow that divinity to come into the world. So it's a two-way operation here. And it's very, very significant. Because unless humankind starts to appreciate in a deep way how to function in the world in that double-stranded way, efficiently and with dignity, then we just carry on making the mistakes that we've been making for thousands of years, actually, and certainly in the last couple of 100 years in the West, because we have, as they say, disenchanted the world. Unless we start listening to that, how will things change? And it's not just for you, personal change, but it's for the collective. Because every time one person starts listening, then there's a ripple effect. I like to think, from the way I see things happening through the internet and people having conversations, that it is happening more and more, that people are beginning to switch on to the notion that we never walk alone. Goodbye. I'll be back shortly. Many blessings.